Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. It is becoming blatantly obvious for everyone to see that Russian military potential is hitting a wall in Ukraine. And while they do still have a lot of resources to fight in 2025, it is absolutely clear that the limit of those resources is already here and they are asking themselves the hard questions. And I think a video came out that is basically demonstrating this whole journey that Russia was on just so well. It's a very short clip of a Russian military tank that is now being turned into, I don't even know how to call this, like a do-it-yourself defense, carrying Russian troops on it, just hitting a ditch and nosediving into nothingness. And I think this is absolutely philosophically where Russia is coming into 2025. And this has been talked about a lot, both on Ukrainian channels and videos and so on. And just latest video has been released by the Azov. I cannot show you the video because it's a combat footage, but I will leave a link to that video in the description down below. In this video, Russians are trying to attack the Azov Brigade's position on the ATVs, or quad bikes if you call them that way. And obviously, it doesn't really go well. But the important part from this that we need to bring is that if Russians are using quad bikes, they're not using the infantry fighting vehicles, they're not using the BMPs. Why is that? Well, because they're struggling and they're having issues and they have to come up with different solutions. But it's also being reported all over the place by the Ukrainian armed forces themselves. So here is one of the fighters, the Officer Plus channel, stating that Russians are basically plundering the local population for their motorized vehicles. So any kind of cars, bikes, just anything that can be used to drive is being plundered by the Russian en masse from the occupied territories because they're having troubles with the armored vehicles. Does it mean that Russian army will become completely incapable and will not be able to do any kind of offensive operations? No, of course they will, because they will just sacrifice more and more resources. But we're talking about degradation of the Russian effectiveness and their capabilities. And that is absolutely definitely happening, and we're seeing that play out right before our eyes. And talking about degradation of capabilities, in my last videos and streams we talked about the Ukrainian surface vessels being able to fight Russian defenses in the face of helicopters, allowing a greater window of opportunity for them to deal damage to Russians. Now we saw the reports that additionally, beyond the helicopters, Russia has sustained damage to another layer of their defenses in the Black Sea. Specifically around the Crimean Bridge, Russians have been putting up a lot of these barges that were there to prevent Ukrainian surface vessels to go through towards the Crimean Bridge. In the latest month or so, there has been massive storms around the area of Crimean Bridge, and a lot of these barges have been either sunk or pulled from that area. So now there is a lot weaker defense of that Crimean Bridge. Now, I don't know if Ukrainians will strike the Crimean Bridge, but it does kind of seems that a lot of the threat is being circulated around that area. We'll see what's going to happen. I would most likely want to see another fire show at that damned bridge. But it doesn't need to be Ukrainians talking about it. It's also Russians themselves talking about the things that are not going that well. There's plenty of Z correspondents talking about the degradation of the Russian military, but a lot of people assume that because there is degradation in the Russian military, that is still fine, because Russia is still kind of reaching their goals. And here I just want to quote the post from specifically the Russian Z propaganda channel about the fact that even on the political aspect, like in achieving a big scale goals, Russia themselves is not really achieving that much. So it's something that I'm telling a lot, but it's also being represented in the Russian sphere as well. So what they were stating is that, number one, we betrayed Armenia for the sake of friendship with Azerbaijan and surrendered Karabakh, which is the region that was disputed between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I'm not going into that conflict. It's a deep problematic topic. There was no great friendship with Azerbaijan and probably will never be, especially after Russia now shut down the Azerbaijani plane. Secondly, the largest country in the world is sorting things out with the unrecognized Republic of Abkhazia, cutting off the supply of electricity, as well as suspending payments while the Abkhazians are fighting on the side of Russians in Ukraine. I hope Abkhazia will not suffer the same fate as Karabakh. There is issue right now in that region of Abkhazia. This is near Georgia. We haven't talked about it, so I'm not going to delve too much into the topic, but there is issues with that as well. For 9 years, they supported completely ineffective regime in Syria, which used Russian money and defense, but did nothing to stabilize the situation in the country. I'm afraid that we will have to evacuate military bases from Syria. Yes, they most probably will. They promised to show what real demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine is. Ukraine is a heavily armed Nazi and aggressive country that controls part of the Kursk region. Yes, part of Russia. 5. YouTube and Instagram are blocked. Yes. And also number 6, Telegram should be blocked too. Yes. So a lot of these medias that are supposedly used by a lot of Russians are also being targeted, and it's not creating any favor for Russia. So someone is really setting up Russian President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. It shouldn't be like this. So like obviously it's like, oh, Putin couldn't have done it themselves, like because it's a propaganda channel, so it cannot say that it's Putin's fault. So yes, there is some evil powers that are playing here to dismiss Putin. But I want to underscore that this is just showing that even in Russia, the most propaganda narratives that they can make, they are still recognizing that they're not really achieving a lot of their goals. So the truth has the tendency to spill out, unfortunately, for Russians. But the good news for Ukraine also keep coming from the European allies. Long promised Mirage 2000 airframes will be coming to Ukraine in January. It was reported that it's going to be somewhere between 3 to 5 planes. And people have asked what will be the impact of this. Most likely these planes will be used as the anti-air systems and training vehicles for other Ukrainian pilots. So the impact of this would be for Ukraine to, for example, use Soviet-made airframes closer to the front lines and make impact that way. So for our perspective, most likely we will not see them in action, but there will still be helpful for Ukraine. And that is, again, great news. And Ukrainian technology is advancing. Russians were kind of pioneering in this case in the technology of FPV drones. They've introduced the drones that were optically guided, but Ukrainians are adapting, and they're adapting fast. And Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has already developed the technology. They already developed the prototypes, and there has been videos shown of these field tests of the Ukrainian fiber optic cables. And it is great news, and it's good to see that Ukrainians are adapting and are able to match the Russian technology. But if we're talking about technology, it's worth noting the biggest problem that Ukraine is having is that a lot of the Western and other powers are still supporting Russia within technology. We keep seeing that there is a lot of technology that is being imported from all across the world, is being used in the Russian weaponry, and the sanctions and our efforts into stopping that are insufficient. The latest was there's Taiwanese company produced drivers for the UMPK, which is the Universal Module for Planning and Correction, or I'm translating it directly from Russians. This is essentially the wings and navigation module that Russians are attaching to their dumb bombs. So when we're talking about Ukrainians in 2024 struggling the most against the aviation bombs, well, Taiwanese companies are also participating in this. This is the point that I feel has been underscored, just how much Russia is actually dependent on the technology that they're importing by legal channels from the other countries. Now, we can say that always they can be found in illegal channels, but any kind of pressure on these channels is crucial. So I feel there's still a lot of the possibilities to work to make sure we prevent Russia to develop more of their technologies and put a stop to it as much as we can. But Ukrainian biological weapon technologies are also not stopping in their place, and they have been developed lately, specifically the counter-drone forces. So they are there to counter any kind of low-flying drones, And we might see this developed very significantly in the coming years. We've heard the expectations that Ukrainians could use the birds as a biological weapons. It seems that they're adapting it to secure cats as a proper military force on the battlefield as well. And then I want to take a moment to remind us what we are doing here and why. Because oftentimes, specifically lately for some reason, there has been a lot of people coming at me and stating that I'm too aggressive and that I just hate Russians or something. No, the only thing I want Russians to do is to get out of Ukraine and mind their own business. The problem is that's not what the Russians want themselves. There has been plenty of material published over the years, and I just want to remind you that they are the bloodthirsty. They are the people that are coming in to the civilian cities. They are the people that coming in to kill, destroy, rape, and steal everything. They have been blatant about this, and we have also received a lot of these recordings from all over the place lately be accumulated by the 3rd Assault Brigade of the commanders actually just giving direct orders, not just some bad apples in the ranks of the infantry, no, specifically commanders giving orders to do all of these heinous war crimes. If you haven't read this in a while, I recommend you rewatch the 20 Days in Mariupol video to remind yourself what we're actually up against here. And the good news is that some responsibility is coming for them. Just recently, Ukrainians have actually came out with a picture and the name specifically of the person that gave out commands to kill civilians in Bucha massacre. This is the just peace we're talking about. Because right now it seems that there is a big push to create some kind of parallel reality narratives that Putin supposedly is sending some kind of a signals, sending some kind of efforts to negotiate that potentially this war can be over by just giving some territory to Putin or whatnot. And I am here to just say this is all a delusion. Articles like these, this is a German newspaper Bild or like a journal, we're not talking about the quality of that newspaper. We're talking about the idea that these narratives, they are being presented like something that is true. This is the same Putin versteher that have gotten us into this situation in the first place. The same people that says oh, we just understand Putin and we know that Putin wants, we know what Putin does, and we people in the Baltics and everyone else that's right close to Russia is repeating. It's no, that is not what Russia is. That is not what Russia wants. Look at the actions. And for that matter, there are articles that are actually showing that Russia is not willing to negotiate. They are not wanting peace. Do they want a ceasefire? Do they want a prolonged negotiation? Do they want to screw you around? Yes. But do they want peace? Absolutely not. Just look at this. There is an article that goes in depth into the Russian activities and hybrid warfare and sabotage that they have been doing. And these articles are being less promoted than something else. And there's countless descriptions of what kind of actions beyond just damaging the cables, the espionage, the fires, the other things that have been happening all across Europe for a long time now. There is so much of it. I will leave a link for this specific article, but it's not long search for you to realize that Russia has been pretty much on the war front against the European Union and Europe in general and the Western allies also. So no, Russia does not want peace. The only peace that we're going to get is the peace that we will be able to secure and let Ukraine secure. There is right now a lot of discussion in Finland about how aggressive should it be. Can it actually do a lot of these things? But there's also action. They're starting to very, very thoroughly check a lot of the Russian cargo ships from the tankers, and they are checking them for so long that they are basically queuing up and not letting them through in any kind of reasonable time. This definitely incurs additional pain on the Russians. This is what I'm talking about. Taking actions, you don't want to be confrontational, okay, then at least that. You want to check a tanker? Check it for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Delay. Make Russia pay. And while all of that is happening, we on this channel, in this community, are going to try to do more for the Ukrainian armed forces. Guys, you've been doing amazing, so greatly. I've been so grateful. And please, If you still can, if you have the opportunity, I will just remind that you can participate in our fundraising campaign to get the 25 trucks to the Ukrainian Armed Forces. We're well over the 70,000. We're on our way to go to the next checkpoint, and we're going to do it all as much as we can to help Ukraine win. I love you. Trust in Ukrainian Armed Forces. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.
We are the R&D unit of the Unmanned System Forces, working on a project dedicated to neutralizing Shaheds. Today, we reach out to Georgie from Ukraine Matters, Car for Ukraine, and Banderomobil team. We urgently need a vehicle to carry out critical combat missions to protect our cities. Your support can make a real difference. Slava Ukraini!